Let's talk about some knit and crochet patterns. Some of them you may already know, some of them you may be encountering for the first time, but I wanted to create a bundle that includes plenty of knit and crochet patterns so that it's like an anthology of summer knits. So let's get started. The first pattern I want to talk about is Padron by Chloe Thurlow. It has a very nice color, and the sample she knit in white. It looks so chic yet so casual. And this is knit in Rowan Summerlight DK, and it has 22 stitch gauge. This is the Thea top by Suzanne Müller, also known as Polo Strict. This is a very casual, very chic, very basic staple. I think that everybody knits in their wardrobes. This is knit with Sunscarn line, and it has a 20 stitch gauge. Actually, I just knitted one in Rowan cotton wool, which is a cotton wool blend. I started with size XS and went on with size S because I wanted a tighter neckline but a looser body. So yeah, this is my Thea top. This is another pattern by Suzanne Miller, the Vegas top. This is also a very basic, very chic staple, which has 19 stitch gauge. This is knit with Lamana Cosma, which is 60% cotton and 40% cellulose. The main difference between the Thea top and the Vegas top is how open you want that neckline. The Vegas top has a higher neckline, and the Thea top has a more open neckline. Other than that, the Thea top looks more casual with the rib around the armholes and around the neckline and at the hem, of course, whereas the Vegas top has an I-cord finish all over. So it has a more classical, chic look to it. As for my Thea top, I'll be talking about it in detail in my next episode, so not this time. The Fira top by Rike Eliassen. This has a larger gauge, which is 16 stitches. This Fira top has a sheer V shape right at the neckline, and this makes this top very attractive, I guess. Urium top by Egoya Knit. This is knitted with 4mm needles, and it has a very basic eyelet lace pattern right in the middle of the front. I think it has a double folded neckline. Yeah, I think it has a double folded neckline and hem, and the armholes are also double knit, kind of. Yeah, it's very chic. I love it. Midsommar Krans sleeveless top by Lena Tösti. This is a free pattern on Ravelry, which has a very nice and attractive leaves lace pattern all around the neckline. It has some bust shaping and some waist shaping, and it requires a 24 stitch gauge in 3mm needles. Adriata top by Giorgi Locatelli. This is a 20 stitch gauge pattern, and it has this beautiful lace pattern all around the shoulders down to the body. On the sides, the rest is stockinette. Filigree Cami by Marzena I'm sorry. This is a 22 stitch gauge pattern, which has an all over lace back and kind of I-cord straps with a minimal lace detail on the front sleeves, and the rest is stockinette. This is a fairly new pattern which has just come out in June 2024. This is a very attractive pattern for me. I was very attracted to it when I first saw it, but then I saw that it's not available in single purchase. There is a bundle of the designer, which has 4 patterns in an ebook, and you have to buy all of them in order to knit one of them. So it comes in 10 sizes, which is very size inclusive, but yeah, you cannot knit it unless you purchase the ebook. It has a very interesting construction. I think the lace back with the button details is knitted separately. I think the front is knitted flat separately, and then there the sides are kind of picked up and knitted, I guess, because they're not vertical but horizontal. The Ingrid top, the famous Ingrid top by Gregory Fibers. This is a 20 stitch gauge, knitted in 3.5 millimeter needles, use 4. This is an all over eyelet pattern. It has a rib around the neck. Is that a picot? I don't know. A picot around the shoulders. Paddy by Amy Christophers. This one is a very relaxed sleeveless top, which has a 20 stitch gauge in 3.5 millimeter needles. This one I first saw it on aka Nora Knits Pair podcast. She was talking about pairs, and this one really attracted me because of the yarn choice. This yarn looks like sand. Actually, it has a sandy texture and color, and the picture is also, the sample photos are also taken on the beach, which is understandable. This is, I think, really attractive, mostly because of the yarn choice. Home Camisole by Kadri, which is kind of a v-neck, yeah, it's a v-neck top, which is knitted with Cardiff cashmere. It has a 22 stitch gauge in 4 millimeter needles, and it has an all over I-cord finish. Vest 23 by Deborah Doherty. This one has a 26 stitch gauge and has some buttons along the sides. It has a vest vibe, which can also be a summer top. It looks so cute. Leela top by Kadri. This one is also a fairly new pattern, June 2024. This one is knitted with 3 millimeter needles, and it requires a 24 stitch gauge, which is kind of a finer gauge. This one has 2 rows of purl rows and a couple of knit rows, which makes it look like rocks, and the olivey green color is really attractive. I don't think that it has neck shaping. It has I-cord shoulder straps, and Soho top by Kadri. This is a 2022 release, and it's still hot. This is a very simple garter stitch pattern, which has faux shoulder seam lines around the sides. As this is a garter stitch, it has to have a faux seam line on the sides. Gasang by Yamagara. This one has some cute flowers down at the hems and in the front neckline, which makes it chic and elegant. This one is knitted in 3.25mm needles and it requires a 27 stitch gauge. Boardwalk Top by Irina Anikieva. This is a very interesting design which has garter slot here on the center front, and it has some sliding eyelet details right at the both sides of the center garter. It has pearl or garter, I think pearl section down on the underarm sides, and it also has pearl stitch finish at the shoulders. Calm Night Cami by Lily Kate Friends. Again, a new pattern. This one requires a 20 stitch gauge and knitted with 3mm needles, US 2.5. And this one has a nice detail on the sides. It has a V neckline and it has double folded finishing touches. Rami Camisole by Kadri, which is an all over rib sleeveless top, which is knitted in Cardiff Cashmere Classic. It has a 22 stitch gauge in 3.75 US 5mm needles. That's a classic staple. Cecile Top by Suzanne Miller is also another rib pattern, but this one is a larger rib pattern, and it also has a larger gauge, which is 25 stitches, and this one is knitted in 3mm needles. Petal Drop Camisole by Florence Miller. This one is worked bottom up, it's not top down. This is a ribbed lace stitch, which looks really fun. It's knitted in Knitting for All Merino with 3mm needles. Pleasanton Top by Magdalena Parker. This is again a very basic staple, which has I-cord stripes and a V neckline. This one requires a 24 stitch gauge and the sample is knitted in 3mm needles. Top Eva by Moshin Knits. This is a square neckline top which requires a 15 stitch gauge, which is a very large gauge. Topsole by Moshin Knits is the famous kind of vest type top, which has some straps to tie on the front. This one requires a 26 stitch gauge in 3.5mm needles. We have a couple of more like this. The next one is like the previous one, Vacation Vest by Park Williams. This is again a vest tied on the front, but this one has buttons. This one is knitted with 5mm needles and it requires 18 stitch gauge, which will be a very quick knit. This one is like the others. This is a free one by Dani Ruiz, the Claudia top. And this one requires a 23 stitch gauge in 4mm needles. Darjeeling Top by Trust Mojo. This one requires a 22 stitch gauge in 3.5mm needles. This one has buttons on the front and it has a very elegant but simple lace detail down at the hem. Sari has just come out with this Mila top. This is an all over lacy cable top, which requires 25 stitch gauge in 3mm needles. And the Love Letter top by Veronica Lindberg, which I'm wearing right now. This one I'll be talking about in my next episode, so I'll just talk about the pattern. This is an all over lace pattern. It's a pretty mindful pattern. This one requires a 20 stitch gauge in 3mm needles. Phoebe top by Amy Sher. This is a cable design sleeveless top which requires a 28 stitch gauge in 3.25mm needles. Anne Wenzel has just come out with a sleeveless top. She had the same eyelet design as a t-shirt before, and now she has the same design as a top. It requires a worsted weight yarn, 20 stitches in 3.5 and 4mm needles. Oolong Tank by Amy Sher is a v-neck lacy front center top. This one requires 25 stitch gauge in 3.5mm needles. Staple linen top. This one has a rib front center design on the front. It's a very sheer top. It requires 21 stitch gauge in 3.5mm needles. Vester by Crescent Wave top by Thea Weserby. This one, as the name suggests, looks like waves in the sea, and the color choice also supports it. This came out in May 2024. It requires 24 stitch gauge in 3.5mm needles. Iris tank top by Along avec Anna. This is an all-over slanted lace design which requires 12 stitches in 3.5mm needles. Lily Kate Friends has Take Turns tank, which has ribs around the shoulders and on the neckline. It requires 24 stitches in 3.5mm needles. Sailor Swift top by Veronica Lindberg, also known as Kutovakika, which I knitted twice in blue and white stripes and in red and cream stripes. This one requires a 23 stitch gauge in 3mm needles. It has an all over I-cord finishing touches. Tosta Tank by Rebecca Clow. She has all those Tosta tops. She just came out with this tank June 2024, which requires 17 stitches in 5mm needles. Slanty Stripes by Emily Curious. This one looks very fun, changing colors in the same row. This one requires 25 stitches in 3.25mm needles. Sandpiper Tank by Aubrey P. Busek. This one is a free pattern. This ribbed pattern has some color blocking stripes, but of course you can knit it in a single color. This one requires 20 stitch gauge in 4mm needles. Square Neck Camisole by Helena Beba. This one is also a very famous one. This square neck ribbed camisole requires 30 stitches, which is a very fine gauge, in 3mm needles. Ranka sleeveless top by Lene Tosti. This one has leaves pattern right on the front. This one also has a square neckline. It has a very interesting and fun detail right on the front and at the back. Those leaves just catch the eye. This one requires 27 stitches in 2.5mm needles. Ellie Summer Top by Simone Ryan. This is ribbed pattern. I think it's broken rib. This one has some waist shaping as a design element. It requires 26 stitches in 3mm needles. Ripple Bralette by Jessame Designs. This is an all-over ribbed bralette which requires 24 stitches in 3.5mm needles. Looks so fun. Tip Top Tank by Emily Boulton. This one is a free pattern. This one has a v-neck and it has two options for the shoulder straps. You can make a tie for the shoulder straps, which is cool. 24 stitch gauge in 3.5mm needles. Outline Tank by Jessame Designs, which has a very fine eyelet lace detail on the v-neck, here at the front and on the sides. 25 stitch gauge in 3.5mm needles. This one also has a T version, which requires 22 stitch gauge. Layla Bralette has a similar kind of eyelet design on the front and on the neckline. This one is a bralette, of course. It's knitted with 4mm needles. Pebble Top Solo by Lena Holm Samso. This one has got my eye since last year because it has a very relaxed, chic look with its picot finishing touches. It has a U or V neckline, I guess. It's knitted with 3mm needles and it requires 28 stitch gauge. 7 p.m. Tank by Tiffany Thigh. And this one is knitted in 2.75mm needles. This one has an interesting construction. The bottom part under the bust is a sideways stockinette stitch, and the upper part, the bust part, is all 1x1 rib. It requires 32 stitch gauge in 2.75mm needles. The basic bra by The Naked Knit. If you like knitted bras like I do, by Naked Knit is very suitable for you. It requires 27 stitch gauge in 2.5mm needles. I have this pattern, but I haven't knitted one yet. I think I got it on Etsy. She sends you an adjustable strap pattern as well for when you buy this bra pattern. Coffee Shop Top by Iris H. This one is an all-over rib bra which requires 12 stitches in 4mm needles. Rota Sleeveless Top by Irene Lynn is an all-over eyelet lace pattern with a split hem. This top is a crop top. It requires 21 stitch gauge in 4mm needles. Adventitious Top by Olga Potano Designs. This tee has a very interesting and fun detail right at the center on the front and in the back. It has a v-neck shape. It requires 30 stitches in 3.25mm needles. Sea Glass Tee by Woolen Pine. Woolen Pine has this sea glass pattern in a couple of her designs. She has a sweater version, she has a cowl version, and this one is the T version. It requires 28 stitch gauge in 3.75mm needles. Beliche by Emily Louise. This one is very interesting because when you knit it in two colors, in stripes, it looks like a completely different design. She has a T version and a sleeveless top version. It requires a 25 stitch gauge in 3.5mm needles. Gimme the Tea by Jenny Ansa. This one is in 52 weeks of easy knits. It requires 22 stitch gauge in 3.25mm needles. This is a very basic raglan shaped tee. I think it's knitted in mohair, but it looks so nice. Tumble Tee by Lydia Morrow. This one requires a 24 stitch gauge in 3.75mm needles, and it's a very basic raglan shaped top. The Little Black Tee by Tyler Earl. She was knitting this, displaying it on her podcast channel, and everyone was so excited, and she wasn't intending to release the pattern, and then everyone was so interested in the pattern that she had to write and release the pattern of this gorgeous simple black tee. This one is knitted in 4mm needles and it requires a 20 stitch gauge. Everyday Attitude by Suzanne Sommer. This striped tee is like next level stripe design. It also has a stripe line down under the arms through the hem. Anna City by Anne Fiscum Sunday. 21 stitch gauge in 4mm needles. It's a basic raglan t-shirt, very staple. Blank Canvas Tee by Minimi Knit Design. Again, a very recent design, June 2024, which has a faux seam line on the center front. It requires 21 stitch gauge in 3.5mm needles. Sonia Shirt by Suzanne Miller. Again, a very basic tee, very attractive, very chic and simple, as most of Suzanne Miller's patterns are. This one has ribbed finishing touches. This one requires 24 stitches in 3.5mm needles. Gabby Tee Solo by Lena Holmsam. So this one is like the other tees, but it has kind of a puff sleeve. 22 stitch gauge in 4.5mm needles. Slider Tee is a free pattern for menswear. This one has a very nice shoulder detail and it has double folded finishing touches. 26 stitch gauge in 3mm needles. Marco Polo Man is another men's pattern which has polo collar and buttons on the upper front. This is a March 2024 design, which is fairly new, and it requires 2.5mm needles and 32 stitch gauge. Strand Tour by Jules Coco. This one is a raglan shaped tee which has a very attractive back panel. 25 stitch gauge in 3.5mm needles. Nomad Tee by Rachel Isley. This one is a very interesting and attractive tee which has color details on the neckline, on the center and on the sleeves. It's a stranded color war tee which requires 26 stitch gauge in 3.25mm needles. Ophelia Blouse by Tamara Jordan. This is knitted with a fingering weight yarn which has 24 stitches and 36 rows in 4 inches or 10 centimeters. It has a very nice lace detail on the neckline down to the front of the body, which connects the two parts of the front with 4 buttons. It's really feminine and attractive. The Wonder Garden by Natalie Pellick. This is also a fingering weight yarn pattern, but it has kind of a larger gauge, which is 22 stitches, and it's knitted with 2.75mm needles used to. It has a very attractive lace detail at the back, which connects the two parts of the back with button details like the one before, and it also has some nice lace details again on the sides coming toward the front of the work. And it's very boxy and breezy for to wear in summer. It's very elegant and very attractive, so feminine. Steska dress by Natalie Pellick again. This one is an all-over lace dress. I think this would be a very good wedding kind of dress, or if it's knitted with white or creamy colorway. This one looks very, very good. It's like an A-shaped dress which comes larger from the underbust part. Another all-over lace dress by Kazia Osmosko. The dress is called Better World Dress. This is a crochet pattern and it's a free pattern, but she asks for some kind of donation, like $1 or so, if you finish and post the result of the dress on social media. It is a very relaxed, very boxy lace dress. She styles it in a couple of different ways, and it has a slight ruffle on the sleeves, which I like very much. Bernie Pants by Jessica Sung. This is a crochet pattern, a crochet pants pattern, which could be used as a beach cover-up. This one is knitted with 3mm hook, and it is knitted with a fingering weight yarn. This one is also a pant, but this one is a knitting pattern by Park Williams. Jet Set Pants. This is a part of a set actually. This one is knitted with a 4.5mm needles and it has a 21 stitch gauge. Another knit beach cover-up pant by Suvi Alavena, flow pants. I have been eyeing on this pattern for such a long time, but I haven't purchased it yet because there's no projects on the Ravelry page. But I think I'll give it a try soon, maybe this summer, I guess. The mesh pattern is knitted with a 10mm needle, and the band is knitted with a 3mm needle, and the gauge is 23 stitches and 34 rows. Cynthia Floral Lace Shirts by Vicky Chan. This is a crochet pattern, and this one looks very elegant and very attractive to put on and pair it with a very fancy top for a very fancy dinner or a drink. And this one is 19 stitches and 10 rows. The hook size is 3mm. Simple Summer Shorts by Wool & Beyond. This one requires a 16 stitch gauge. This one is knitted with Sandscarn Thick Line, which is a very shiny yarn. Fringe Cami by Flanor Alice. This one is a sleeveless top which requires a 30 stitch gauge and 40 rows, which is a fine gauge. What makes it different than the other basic tops or camis are the fringes. It has some fringes at the hem, and it has a ladder stitch throughout the body. Walk the Line Skirt by John Ho. This one requires a 10 stitch gauge, which is a large gauge, and this one is knitted with a 4mm needle with a DK weight yarn. This one is like a pencil skirt, and it has some rib details on the sides. 9 p.m. Tank by Tiffany Thigh. This one has a thinner strap, so it's not that bra friendly. This one is knitted with 3.25mm needles, requiring 28 stitch gauge and 44 rows. Pico Somerset by Emily Narenst. I've been eyeing on this pattern since it first came out last year. It's a t-shirt and a short pair, which has, as the name suggests, picot edgings all over. It looks so cute and so casual. Rad Rock Split Skirt by Amanda Lee. This one is also a pencil skirt which has a split hem on the front. This one has an 18 stitch gauge and is knitted with an Aran weight yarn, so it's a pretty quick knit if you're looking for a pattern to knit a pencil skirt. Asma Kimono Cape by Lakeside Loops. This one is a crochet pattern. Lakeside Loops has a YouTube channel where she talks about her patterns and designs, and she guides you through her designs step by step. You can crochet her patterns for free, but if you like a written version, you can purchase them on Etsy or on Ravelry. This crochet kimono is crocheted with an Aran weight yarn. It has a 14.25 stitch gauge. Crochet hook size is 5mm. This one is also from Lakeside Loops, so it's also a crochet pattern, which is a beach cover-up. If you're looking for a beach cover-up crochet pattern, this one is free on YouTube, and you can purchase the written pattern on Ravelry and Etsy. This one is also crocheted with a worsted weight yarn, which requires a 19 stitch gauge, and it has some side splits. Rib Lace Raglan by James and Watts. This one is also in my radar for like 2 years now. This one is a ladder stitch raglan crop top, which is knitted with a fingering weight yarn, and it requires 17 stitch gauge in 30 rows. 3.75mm needles, US 5. Mika Tee by Joanna Schutz. This tee has a triangle ladder detail here on the front, and this one is knitting for all of pure silk, a 27 stitch gauge with 2.5mm needles. Top Kropotchki by Svetlana Tkachenko. This tee has an all over eyelet line details. This one is a raglan tee which requires an 18 stitch gauge with 4.5mm needles. Ivy top by Iris H, 28 stitch gauge in 38 rows with 3mm needles. This tee combines cables with eyelet texture, and it has minimal short sleeves, and I think it has some bust shaping because it is tighter on the waist. 06 cable cut out by Eleanor Alice. This one is an all over cable pattern which has a window at the hem of the back which is connected with I-cords. 29 stitch gauge in 44 rows with 3mm needles. Leafy Unravelry Vest by Pickles. 18 stitch gauge, 28 rows in 3.5mm needles, all over lace, leaf lace. Pure Mesh Pullover by James & Watts. 7 stitch gauge in 18 rows, knitted with 8mm needles. It could be worn as a beach cover-up because it's a mesh pattern. Another pattern by James & Watts, and another mesh pattern. This one I bought the pattern, but I haven't knitted yet because you can't make any mistakes with this design. I couldn't find a way to correct my mistakes if I make one while I was watching for the pattern, so I haven't knitted one yet, but I think I will be knitting one soon. 14 stitch gauge in 24 rows in lace pattern with 4.5mm needles. Scribble Top by Alice Hoyle. 21 stitch gauge, another mesh pattern in 17 rows with 10mm needles. This one could also be worn as a beach cover-up, and this could also be knitted as a beach cover-up dress when you just elongate the pattern. This one is not listed on Ravelry, but this crochet top is, like the name suggests, the last minute crochet top by Knotedthread. This one is a mesh crochet crop top with adjustable ties. It could be crocheted in no time, so it's a last minute top which I will be crocheting so soon. Sunnyside Cap by Wool and Beyond. Because this hat is knitted with a summery yarn, I think it's cotton yarn, the designer realized that in time the hat grows larger, so she adjusted the pattern this year so it is updated. This cap requires a 20 stitch gauge with 4.5mm needles. And Urla Bandana by myself, which is an all over eyelet lace hairkerchief pattern which could be knitted in any needle size with any yarn of your choice. I knitted my samples in 3.25mm needles. This one is knitted from the bottom with the increases, and it's finished with an I-cord edging. I have a step-by-step YouTube tutorial of my pattern, which is a free pattern on Ravelry. You can just knit it in like a day or 2 days, and this would be a very summery coverage for your head on the beach or while you're walking or shopping. And yeah, please check out my Ravelry page for the free pattern of this hairkerchief bandana, and watch my step-by-step YouTube tutorial if you need it. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you like some of the designs that I shared to knit this summer, and leave a comment down below for the ones that you're interested, that you are inspired to knit, or you may have knitted some of them. Just let me know if you're happy with the results or content. Let me know how you feel about the pattern or the finished product. And thank you so much for watching. Please like the video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye!